What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to day 75 of Autodesk Fusion. Today we're working on is kind of a sprocket system with a belt drive. Now I had to cheese a little bit because I don't think there's a way to successfully make a belt within Fusion that acts like a belt, but we can put a place marker in there and then do motion constraints or a motion drive. That way things act the way we expect them to. So what I do have right now is I have two different pieces. Let's go back to original. There we go. We got two different pieces with two different diameters, and they're both set to revolute around one time at the same, I would say, revolution or angular speed, but not necessarily linear speed. And so that way we get them to work as expected. You can do this, and I might do this with, maybe step up or step down, belt drives, talking about powers and motors and things like that. But for right now, we're just going to do this simple part. So let's go ahead and get started on it. All right, so we got new design. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create one of my sprockets. I think it's called a sprocket. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I don't know what defines a sprocket. Does it have to be for a chain? I don't know. We're going to just keep on moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I did for most of my gears so far. We're just going to draw a simple tooth gear. Oh, I didn't like that. Let's try this again. We're just going to draw a simple tooth gear the best we can. Doesn't have to be perfect since we're doing motion constraints rather than contact sets. It doesn't need to be perfect. So what I'm going to do now is we got one tooth. Let's do circular pattern, and let's make a bunch of teeth for it. So we've got my geometry selected. Now I'm going to select my center point, and I think we're going to get away with about 40, maybe even 50, 55 maybe. All right, we're getting closer and closer to that number. Remember, when we are making our gear tooth systems, if you're making them from scratch, you do not want your geometry to overlap. So this is probably the best number I'm going to get. I probably can't go one more. If I do, they're going to overlap. It's going to create a lot of problems with your geometry. We're going to call that done. Everything looks good because each of those teeth are shaded that light blue color. So let's go ahead and throw in my center diameter of 1/4 inch and finish this sketch. I'm going to go ahead and extrude this on out, minus that inside piece. There we go. We deselect that inside piece, extrude it back 1/2 inch, and we have our beginnings of our sprocket. We're going to go ahead and make that a new component. All right. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create those end caps, these pieces right here that'll hold the belt in place. So what I'm going to do is create a new sketch. And I'm just going to find some diameter bigger. So it looks like 1.125. No, let's do 2.5 just for safety's sake. Hit finish sketch on that. Let's go ahead and extrude that on out just 1/10 inch. Looks fine. We're going to make that a join because we want this to be part of our sprocket, kind of welded too. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to also create my center axle, and we're going to go ahead and make that welded as well, just because I want this thing to all be one piece. So I'm going to do a symmetrical extrusion, kind of extrude out both sides. That way it's kind of doing as expected. I'm making this part pretty quick, so I'm going to try to see if I can make that flush. That looks okay. We're going to click join there, and we've got the first half of our sprocket done. The next thing I'm going to do is, instead of that back piece and having that geometry in my way, what we're going to do now is we're going to hit M on our keyboard for move copy, and we're going to copy components. And we're going to click on this component, create a copy, and just drag it on whatever distance and however long you want your belt system to be. This 3 inches right here is actually going to be pretty important later when we build our belt. Okay, we're going to click OK, and this looks all right so far. Now let's go ahead and make our belt. So I'm going to click on Create Sketch, click on the back side here, and we're going to project this geometry. So I'm at P on my keyboard, and we're going to project both of those gears. That way we can get some of that tooth measurements to be projected on there as well. And then we're going to unselect that projection link, click OK. And then I'm going to make those cogs actually now disappear. Actually, not for right now, because it looks like one of my pieces didn't project. Let's fix that. There we go. That looks okay. So now we're going to make our belt. We're going to use a shape we don't use too often. We're actually going to use a slot. And we're going to use center to center overall slot. So we're going to click on the two centers of our part and then kind of eyeball what the thickness of that belt should be. And that looks about okay. We're going to find where the belt is supposedly going to be leaving the gears, and we're just going to draw a line straight across. And then we're going to do the same thing on the bottom side here, about approximately where that belt system is going to be pushing off of each other, and just go straight across. Now, all this geometry is constrained. You can do some trims if you really want to, but I find it to be just to leave it as is. Make our other sprockets kind of up here. We're going to E for extrude, and we're just going to click that outside profile. We're going to bring it inwards. It's going to do something funky, and I'm not too concerned about that because Fusion is trying to predict what you want it to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this as a new component. When you create it as a new component, it doesn't freak out on you anymore, and it's kind of okay. All right, that looks all right. We have our belts now officially created. So let's go ahead and make some, let's call it Sprocket. And you notice Sprocket 1 is automatically called Sprocket for the second one, and that's because as it is a copy, and this is a really cool thing, since I copy that component, whatever changes I make to one is going to be or should be reflected on the other. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add that end cap for that piece, and you notice my preview throws that other end of that sprocket to keep the belt on the other piece as well. So since it's a copy, it's a live copy, and so what I ever do to one edit, it's going to do to the other. Click OK, and we're looking all right. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create both of my wheels. So pretty quickly, I'm just going to copy that circle, do an outside circle. Let's do 2 inches here. Do another circle. Actually, I can't do that because that's going to be a different body. So go and extrude that back. And so here's the exact thing I don't want to happen, because I don't want this to be a join. I want this to be a new component. That way these aren't copying off each other and they're not continually building. So we got belt, component 3, and that's just going to be a wheel. It's looking okay. Let's go ahead and make our other wheel on this end and then throw in some of our constraints. Hit finish sketch. Go and extrude this on back. And we want that to be a new component. And that could just be wheel. So what we notice is that my component here, wheel 1, 1, is because both of these are called wheel, but they're not connected. Sprocket 1, 2 says that these are active and they are connected, and so what you do to one does to the other. These will not affect each other because of how we've used them and what we've named them. We've made 2 different parts with the same name rather than making one part and making a copy of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and we should be done here with most of our parts. All right, so I'm going to call this done in this video, folks. If you have any questions, let me know. The follow-up video, the second video to this, we'll be throwing in our textures and our constraints to make sure this thing works appropriately. All right, guys, if you need any problems, if you have any problems or questions or comments, concerns, let me know, and I will see you on the next video.